Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Weekly Wrap. Mirko, Anthony, nice to see you both on the screen. How are you both?
Very
Going
well,
well.
I always love putting you both on the scene to see who'll answer first.
In
Anthony, I'll
sync.
go to
I'll
you
be I'll
first.
be I'll be honest. I'm logging into the markets now to give our listeners a live number as opposed to a look through the rear vision mirror. So that's what I'm
I'll,
doing right now. I'm almost there.
I'll let you do that. Anthony, how you going, buddy? You going well?
very good, Luke. Yep,
Good.
good to be
Good.
back. Couple of weeks off. I see you two became tax specialists a couple of weeks ago, discussing
Sorry about that.
Allegra Spender's tax policy. That was good.
Yeah, look, Allegra Spender, I've got to give her some credit. She at least put it out there, and at least she's having a conversation. So credit to her. Mirko, how are you, my friend?
Going really well, Luke. Looking forward to the weekend, I must admit. Even though the weather's not looking that flash, it can't come soon enough. It's like I don't know where the week's gone. Next week's a short week again, and the following week is a short week again. So it doesn't make life any easier, to be perfectly honest.
That it does not do. That it does not do. Now, you want to give us an update on markets. It's been an interesting week. A lot of the press would have you believe that the world is imploding, but the markets have been relatively resilient, I dare say.
Yeah, it certainly has, and our messaging speaking to clients has always sort of been pretty consistent on that front. And I look at these numbers here across the US S&P 500, the Nasdaq, the All Ords, and I see a number of days where market movements have been in excess of 1% in both directions. Yeah, so you need to be really careful as an investor to sort of be making moves that would be considered rash, that sort of go against what your long-term strategy actually is. And they can be really costly mistakes when the market moves so much in such a short space of time. So I think it's important, and I know I sound like a broken record on this, but we've been doing this for a hell of a long time. And from our perspective, just being able to sort of work your way through that noise, revisit your strategy, and see where you're at should not change at all. So whatever the strategy was, a month ago, I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't be very different, in people's circumstances when you're taking into account short, medium, long-term stuff. But in terms of the markets themselves, I just picked up that All Ords number. So US is so far this week down, call it 0.5%. Nasdaq is down 1%. The All Odds is off a couple of percent, so we're off about 2% here. We're trading down today 0.37 off the back of the US markets coming off. And I think that what we've actually seen this week is the market is desperately trying to hang on to little bits of news and trying to interpret those pieces of news. And I'm completely amazed that, the market buying into Donald Trump making an announcement on. Haven't listened to what I'm saying now, right? I'm actually trying to. My head's going to fall off my shoulders as I say this. But where the market is actually listening to Donald Trump talking to us through his social media platform that he owns, and saying, "You Butte, it's going to be a great day because we've negotiated a peace deal or something with Iran." And within 2 hours, Iran turns around and goes, "That's complete BS, guys. There is no deal. We haven't talked to anybody. We haven't agreed to anything." And market goes in the other direction. So this is the sort of stuff that the market is currently actually doing. Yeah. The reality for us is that the oil price is still hovering around the $100 mark. There's poor people that have got diesel cars that are paying $3.20 per litre. Our farmers don't have enough oil. So there's a lot to take in there. In terms of data points, we had our inflation data come in this week, and before we bring out the champagne corks, yes, it was 3.7 for February versus 3.8 in Jan, so it actually came off a bit, but that does not take into account this war starting either. And and if you take the RBA's favoured measure of inflation, which actually cuts out energy and food prices, the inflation rate is the trimmed mean inflation is still stuck at 3.3%. So they're not going to be happy about that. Does that mean in May that we get another rate rise? Yeah, there's a lot of noise about that, guys, that we actually will move upwards from 4.1.
Do you think just thinking about that, Mirko, do you think that would be wise? Like, I, I can understand the inflation aspect of it, but there's inflation which is caused by us where we go out and spend a lot of money, and there's inflation caused by external shocks where the consumer actually has no control over what happens next. It would be somewhat premature, you'd like to think, for the Reserve Bank to then go and increase interest rates on the back of something that consumers can't control.
I don't disagree with that notion whatsoever, but having watched the RBA for quite some time and how much they adhere to the data actually points to an economy that's growing modestly and is still strong. Unemployment is still, in check, and it is this inflation data that they keep banging on about. So, but even if you take out the energy and the food, and they're saying that the inflation rate was 3.3, that's still miles above where they would like to be. Yeah, they'd rather be in around that 2.5 mark. So I'm concerned if they go hard with the rate that we actually tip our economy into a lot of trouble. That's my concern. Regardless of what the data says, I think the real world, and I think the beauty of the people that listen to what we talk about are people that actually live in the real world. Not everyone is flying out there, honestly. Like, that's the reality. And I think that the inflation, the interest rates could actually play out very, very quickly. And, and what you were looking at, in terms of a strong economy could turn around very quickly. And that's my concern. I'd like to think they sit on their hands, in truth, for me, but I don't know that will happen.
Yeah, okay. One thing that has become clear is the optimism of markets has probably caught us all by surprise. In saying that, I think markets are responding the way they need to respond. The reality is the fundamentals are still there. However, the things in the background, I guess those things that they talk about, the concept of a recession, the chances or the likelihood of a recession, are probably emerging, or the drums are beating a lot louder, if that kind of makes sense. So we've just got to be careful there. Anthony, if we think about the cause of all these things in markets, clearly it's this Iran issue, and the Iran situation seems to have gone from bad to worse. And, it's gone bad to worse for a range of reasons. One being a lack of reasoning, I guess, like why are we there in the first place? Was it weapons and mass destruction? Was it regime change? Was it a land grab? What's the cause of this? I think the other thing that's probably intimating why it's gone from bad to worse is because there's an absence of an exit plan. From your point of view, I know you do a lot of reading, you're paying attention to what's going on out there. Have you got any thoughts or any ideas in terms of what happens next?
The key thing for me, and like when we hear the news about Trump's reached out to them and he's put forward a plan, and then they've come back and said, no, it's inappropriate, but here's what we require. The issue at the moment is we're not sure what's true and what's false. The challenge that I think we need to try and understand, but get our heads around, is effectively what is Trump's end game here? Because clearly this can't go on forever, and it's a case of, as much as he's trying to get the allies on side and effectively is having a crack at them along the way, there has to be, what we don't know is what he's trying to achieve by the end of this. And you're right. Is it a land grab? Is it a case of he wants greater supply of oil? Or what is it? Is it a weapons issue? We're not sure. So I think until such time, and I think what you're dealing with at the other side is that he's getting to the point where he likes getting his own way. And if he's not, then we're going to continue. I can't see how this is going to play out successfully for anybody. So you would hope that at some point they're going to come to some form of terms. But at the end of the day, the guy in charge, he killed his father, so he's not going to let this go lightly. So I can't see where this stops at present, because you're not dealing with. There's a fair bit of emotion tied up in this, and Trump's ego to go with it.
Yeah, and I think those two aspects are really dangerous, and it's good that you actually were able to piece those two things together. Look, I think the challenge here is when Iran responded, there was two ways to respond. You could respond by attacking your foes. So obviously they could go and attack Israel, they could go and attack America from that point of view. And instead of doing that, they quickly realized that they couldn't win that sort of scenario. And what they decided instead was to attack them where it hurts, i.e. the infrastructure assets. And the problem, I think, and this is where the market may have got this a little bit wrong, the market is kind of going, well, we're hoping that the war will stop. But it's not so much that the war will stop, it's the damage that's being caused as a result of this war. So infrastructure assets have been destroyed, which aren't going to get repaired within a week or two. So tomorrow, this all gets resolved anyway. The flow of oil, the flow of natural gas just doesn't happen overnight. We've blown up key assets. And I think what Iran, and kudos to Iran for doing so, clearly they can't fight America from an army perspective or from a naval perspective. But what they can do is hurt them at the hip pocket. And I think they've been very clever in targeting those assets and those resources, which therefore explains why they've hit assets in Kuwait, why they've hit assets in the United Arab Emirates from that point of view. So you can actually see what their game plan is. And I think that probably caught the Trump administration unaware. I don't think they were prepared for that scenario. And I think now they're scrambling to come up with it. In terms of an exit strategy, I think an exit strategy does exist, but I don't think it exists the way America believes it exists. And I think America, their view was, or I believe America thought their view was that they could do something similar to what they did in Venezuela. That's clearly not the case. I think what will happen here is, and I worry about this, it appears that Iran might potentially receive payments for boats going through the strait. And I think there might be some payments in reconstructing what you've destroyed. And it's going to be a challenge for Donald Trump and that administration to redress this in a way where it looks like a win, when clearly I don't think it is a win. Just a view. Interested in your thoughts.
The question I would pose is that what scope is there for some of the other key leaders of the world to get involved with Trump to effectively try to bring this to a head? Because as much as they're not standing beside him, beating their chest as he is, but it's having an impact on everybody. So it's at what point are these other leaders going to step up and arguably try and pull him into line or bring the discussion to the table?
That's probably where it happens, Anthony. It's likely that these countries, instead of providing resources and support at a military level, it's likely that they will instead provide support with dealing with Iran behind the scenes to see if they can find a landing spot and perhaps make a contribution of sorts to the rebuild. I imagine. Okay.
Or perhaps rather than support, apply economic pressure on the United States in the way that they, go about sourcing their own energy requirements and the like as well. So I'm fascinated by this discussion, gents, and I think that trying to work out what an exit strategy looks like, what success looks like, what a loss looks like when the perpetrating parties actually don't know themselves we're really going to struggle. But I did have this thought of, if we're going to sort of charge boats to come through, just a note to all the captains of all the oil tankers out there: when you hear double beeps on your e-tag, that means you have to top up your account, otherwise you can't go through. just to be aware, with your 50,000 million litres of oil, just remember that double beeps no good. You got to top up your account.
That is gold. That is gold. Since we're talking about this, and Trump has been very critical of NATO and the allies for not providing support. Does he have a point?
You can't ask for support when you actually don't sort of engage people in the whole concept going in. And I don't know if anybody caught that discussion with the Japanese Prime Minister. one of the most awkward things I've ever seen. I'm like, hey, you didn't really tell us that you were going to do this. And he goes, I was all about the surprise. And he goes, you guys should know about surprise. You remember Pearl Harbor? And I'm going, what is going on right now? So yeah, not sure that the Allies sort of had much say or prelude as to what was coming next, and still don't know, unfortunately.
Yeah, look, there are moments about Donald Trump where you do feel like it's Christmas Day and you've rolled out grandfather around the Christmas table and he's in his 90s and he comes up with a view where you think, yeah, I'm not sure you should have said that. But
he's had a few too many shardies.
There is a bit of that. There is a bit of that. And look, you can't blame allies and you can't blame NATO for being a little bit annoyed. One, they were blindsided by the situation in the first place. Two, their charters actually are a defensive unit, not an attacking unit. So that's a separate issue. So there's that whole thing. I guess there's also there's a little bit in the tank there where you kind of go, well, you've spent the last 12 months abusing us, telling us how useless we are, telling us how wonderful your army is and how strong your navy is. Why do you need our support? Because if you're so strong, why wouldn't you do it? And I think the problem there is the Iranians have actually found the underbelly. And this is the challenge. So the challenge for Trump now is, I do think we'll end up with an exit here. I do think that this will self-resolve itself sooner rather than later for the benefit of everybody, because even from Iran's perspective, they need income coming in as well. In that regard, I don't think it's a victory for the United States. I think they end up with egg on their faces, and it's how we actually dress this up to make it look like a win. And I think that's the challenge for the Trump administration at the moment, which is pretty tough on them.
Hang on, if I was
dressing it up to look like a win for him won't be a problem.
It's all in the marketing. And in answer to your question, Luke, asking the allies for assistance and whatnot, if I was a child in the playground at primary school and I had this situation, I would have turned around and said, well, I don't need your help anyway, guys. Well, you know what? That's the response they got.
True. All right, enough of Trump and enough of what's going on there. This has exposed Australia to a large degree. Our supply chain, or the absence of a supply chain, has come home to roost again. You would have figured that after COVID, we would have learned some lessons. We haven't, and it's here again. And we've now got this fuel issue that we're dealing with. It also probably throws into question the budget. Like poor Jim Chalmers is trying to arrange a budget, and he's talking about future issues and problems that are down track, but there's also the immediacy of that. And the drafting of that budget, which was already incredibly difficult, I imagine would be magnified tenfold as a result of what's going on. And I guess the other thing there from that point of view, what does it do from an Australian investment perspective? Like we're starting to see property clearance rates slow down and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things going on in that space. I guess from your viewpoints, are there any views or any opinions in that space as to what, i.e. the Australian government should be doing at this particular moment in time at a political level and also at a budgetary level?
I think this situation creates a real headache for the federal government heading into the budget in May, because like we said before, we received the February inflation data and it seemed to be stable. It was off a little bit compared to what it was in January, but wait till we get to sort of the March situation. And if you wanted any evidence of how far this sort of flows through the Australian economy, and let's just talk about Australia, we've seen what's happened at the petrol bowser. We've seen the shortages in rural areas, which is then becomes a massive problem, for our food and for our groceries and all that sort of stuff. So we're going to see rises there. We've seen what the airlines have done, right? So the airlines have, I think the technical term, Luke, we spoke about this, was gouging. I think that's the only way I could describe what's happening there. And even in the building industry, a lot of the product, and I must be honest, I wasn't aware of how much oil played in things like, PVC piping and all that. So all of a sudden we've got this explosion in the cost of materials as well in the building industry. So, fertilizer, there's a product called urea that is required, that requires, oil products and the like. this all compounds to a serious problem and a cost of living crunch that we are already experiencing now. Like everybody keeps banging on about, we're here to address the cost of living, etc. I don't know our budget actually allows for too many arrows to be fired to address that problem in May.
Yeah, it's a massive challenge for that, and I think within all this, he's trying to also think about the problems of tomorrow as well. So we're talking about things like tax reform. We're talking about things like funding government expenditures and so on, and how we go about doing these sorts of things. And trying to balance up this seesaw, I think, would be next to nigh impossible. Anthony, do you have any views on that?
Oh, I think that's right, Luke. You've got an immediate action budget, which effectively requires a focus on things like the cost of living and immediate pressure relief for families and business. But then you've effectively got a budget where he needs to be looking future focused 3 to 5 years out in terms of what that's going to look like from, as you said, government reform or tax reform. So yeah, there's a couple of if you probably go back 6 weeks ago, he probably was pretty clear around what that was going to look like, and now he's got a curveball that's been thrown in that's causing him some grief, and I suspect causing the current government some grief in terms of where that deployment of capital or spending is going to be.
Correct, and I think the other problem there too is it is so far out to the budgets. We've got another 5 weeks effectively. A lot can happen in 5 weeks. Because in 5 weeks, if this war is still going on in 5 weeks' time, I would suggest that we're in a far significantly worse position than what we are today, purely because of the way the fuel crunch is going from that perspective. And if we resolve the situation, a lot of the stuff you could be in building could be a waste of time because you don't need it anymore. So it's an interesting balance at the moment, that's for sure.
Well, the thing is, if it stops today, or there's an agreement today or tomorrow or over the weekend, it's still going to have a flow-on effect. It's not like it's immediate. So it's not like there's 10,000 tankers sitting in that ready to go. It's a case of those that haven't moved can only move at one pace. So it's still going to be a supply shortage for a while to come.
I would argue as well, Anthony, in terms of whatever transpires in the short term, the immediacy of it, we've got to start thinking more medium term, longer term as a country. And I think part of our policy scenario should be, well, we can't afford not to have reserves or manufacturing capabilities on key requirements within our own nation and expect to be okay. In a world that is intertwined, as much as we'd like to think that the world works by rules, it doesn't work by rules. And I think Donald Trump has changed the view of that to a large degree. So we've just got to, I think the government needs to be brave in terms of not look at the immediacy of today and getting re-elected tomorrow, but go what's in the best interest of the country longer term and start putting in place the strategies to deal with that.
Yeah.
Well, they've clearly been caught out, and effectively having crisis meetings well after the fact is they're trying to put a band-aid on a sinking ship.
Yeah, no. The problem that we've also got there too is I think the government is trying not to cause panic, and not trying to cause panic causes panic to a certain degree. So it makes it a bit kind of counterproductive in terms of the messaging. From an investment point of view, Mirko, just getting back to that, we're starting to see clearance rates on property and so on becoming quite soft in New South Wales or in Sydney and in Melbourne. From that point of view, is that because of the interest rates or is that because of the uncertainty? What do you think is causing that?
Yeah, look, I think it's a bit of both. There's certainly some pressure with it. Someone mentioned before the psychology and the psychology of inflation, the psychology of potential interest rate hikes, which is, what we're starting to hear about, play a really big role in this. And once people start losing a little bit of confidence, start getting a little bit of nervous about something that actually hasn't actually occurred right now. So as it stands right now, no, we're not in a recession and the rest of it. But the psychology says, well, are we heading that way? And the more we start hearing about that, so I think that, some of the confidence is there. And We had a client this week that was negotiating a property buy on the North Shore in Sydney, and the buyer's advocate that was working for them bought the house for substantially less than the vendors actually wanted. And the discussion went something like, hang on a second, you've just offered me less than you offered me a month ago. And the buyer's advocate turned around and said, yeah, but that was before the war broke out and before 2 interest rate rises. Either take it or we're going to walk. And you know what? They took it. So, people's psychology is really important here. And I think that's where you could have they talk about there's a huge lag before the economy feels the effect. But that lag is sort of circumvented by the fact that people start thinking about it already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, fair point from that point. I guess the lesson for investors there is, we've got noise and there's the response to that noise, but you've also got your long-term strategy from that point of view. So unless something's changed out of a long-term strategy point of view, you really shouldn't be responding to the noise. Is that a fair observation?
100%. The way that we talk about our assets, the way that we talk about positioning for short, medium, long term. And I'll go back to it again in case anyone's forgotten my banging on about this. You need to ensure that you are not a forced seller of any of your assets, whether it's your share portfolio, whether it's your super account, whether it's your principal residence or your investment property. Never be the price taker and never be the person that has no choice but to have to sell. That's the key. Yeah. And the minute you can do that, you'll be okay.
Here. And I think from our investors, just to remind them as well, it's really important. At moments like this, it feels like doing nothing doesn't feel right. And more often than not, doing nothing is the right response. And what is really important to understand and appreciate is that you are well structured, both from a mandate point of view and both from a quality point of view. And you're also well diversified as well, which therefore means that risk is being managed as best as possible in what is a complicated environment. In saying that, if you are worried and if you are a little bit concerned, absolutely, lean in. That's what we're here for. We're here to help. We're here to explain and to reassure, because mark my words, we're looking at all these things, and there've been a lot of sleepless nights just trying to wake up and figure out what is going to happen next. And we don't know as well in terms of the realities of markets. Markets are responding as they do respond, and they're responding to a situation which is very different. So we're not talking about economic fundamentals here. We're not talking about GDPs. We're not talking about inflation rates or whatever. We're talking about geopolitical events which are causing shocks into the system. And when they cause shocks into the system, the responses are always different. And we can only ever go back and go, well, previously when this occurred, this was the response. We've had 50 years since then. The world has evolved significantly since. So we just need to bear those sort of factors in mind. Gentlemen, it is never boring catching up and having a conversation. I'm always fascinated with the responses. So thank you for sharing today. Has the weather changed in Melbourne or what? Like Wednesday night, we're out in town, short sleeves, life has looked great. The humidity was out there, touch of Queensland about the world. Woke up this morning and thought, oh my Lord.
The heater was on at our place last night.
Already.
What is going on?
The heater was on already 26th of March. That is crazy.
Yeah.
I can tell you there's a couple in the office now with heaters at their feet.
It is amazing how quickly Melbourne changes. It makes Melbourne a joy, I must admit. Now, Anthony, the Cats saluted last night in Geelong. You must be pretty excited.
Yeah, I only worked out at about 10 o'clock last night that they're actually playing. So, as I've said to you before, my interest for AFL starts in around about May. So, any win at the moment is good. Otherwise, I'm copying it from every Essendon supporter in the office. But whilst they're struggling, it's all good times.
Yeah, no, fair enough too, mate. And look, my interest in AFL starts in February and stops by the middle of February usually. So that's that. What about you, Mick? We're having the game of the season this weekend, Mergo. Essendon versus North Melbourne. Clash of the Titans, that is.
Has there ever been a game in the AFL that's ended in a scoreless draw? Can someone please look up the statistical facts on that? It's a fair chance at Marvel Stadium that could happen.
Yeah, look, I'm more fascinated about the number of fans that are going to roll out there on Saturday night. I think there'll be a lot more North Melbourne supporters than Essendon supporters, unfortunately. So one of those ones. Gentlemen, have we got anything exciting for the weekend? Mick, what have you got planned?
Weekend run for the kids Sunday actually, so that'll be fun.
Nice.
over the Balti through the Domain Tunnel. So always a really feel good event. Always actually probably one of the, if there is a such thing as a fun run, a lot of people would question that. It's actually an outstanding vibe, that event. So, and amazing. I think this is the 20th anniversary of that event. So it'd be good fun Sunday morning.
Good stuff. What about you, Anthony? What are you playing, mate? Anything exciting?
Not much Sunday. Tomorrow, unfortunately, we have a memorial service to attend for one of our bowls guys whose son, who was living in the States, passed away. So, it'll be a celebration of life tomorrow. But, one of those things. It's, not easy.
Yeah, no. Look, that's never good to hear. Never good to hear. All right, gentlemen. Well, bidding you both a wonderful weekend. Wishing our clients a wonderful weekend as well. Enjoy. Clearly, the weather is changing, so might be time to rug up, get a good book and a nice glass of red, I think, in hand. That's a nice way to finish the weekend. Maybe turn off the news as well is a good suggestion. To our team here at Innate, welcome. Thank you as always. The work you do is extraordinary. And to Loretta Dixon. Loretta joined us this week. She's our new Chief or Client Services Officer in terms of the business, and she's doing a great job in the first week. So we welcome her as well. Gentlemen, until next week, take care, all the very best, and we'll see you then. Cheers.
See you guys.